Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar on social sciences and humanities in the ERC. We are happy to see so many of you. We're waiting a bit more, but I think we'll just prioritize starting on time, and then people will have to log in bit by bit. So we've been looking forward for today, and hopefully you can see my presentation. Yeah. So just before we get started, I just want to let you know that we do have this Q&A function in the webinar that you can use if you have any questions. You're welcome to ask your questions during the different presentations, but we will try to answer them in the end after all of the presentations, so we don't interrupt too much. If you have any technical issues or comments, which are not questions, then please use the chat function, and then we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible.
Yeah. And my name is Anna Aagaard Jørgensen, and I'm a colleague of Katrine and also works with ERC. And I want to say a bit about Eurocenter, where we are placed. We are placed at the Ministry of Science and Higher Education, and we offer national contact point services for Denmark. So all Danish researchers and companies can use our services if they want to apply for funding from Horizon Europe. We advise on all programs in Horizon Europe. Katrine and I are specialized in the ERC, but I mean, we can help you find the right topic in Horizon Europe. We can help you on how to fill out the application forms. We can help you. We do trainings. We do webinars like this one, and we help you with finding a partner as well if there's relevant. We also have a really nice website where you can find information both in Danish and in English about Horizon Europe, and we sort of give an overview of our services. And we have a magazine called EU Indblik. It's only in Danish and it's published 4 times a year, where I have special themes regarding Horizon Europe. The last one was about green research and innovation. Yeah. And we also have social media activities, of course, and then we do webinars, courses, information meetings, and whatever. And you're always welcome to contact us by email or phone. And we're pleased to come out and give a talk on ERC if you want that at your institutions.
Yeah, so moving on for the program for today. Our first speaker will be Head of Sector, Alice Rajewski, who is working at the ERC's executive agency. After that, we have Associate Professor Laura Bang Rasmussen from the University of Copenhagen, who is an ERC grantee who will tell about her experience applying within the SH domain. And then finally, we have Professor Paul Fritz Kjær from Copenhagen Business School, who's also an ERC grantee, who will talk about his experience applying also within the SH domain. After these 3 presentations, we have this Q&A session where you're welcome to ask questions, and we will all do our best to answer them. And then we will be done at 3:30. Yeah, so I will just start by welcoming you, Alice, and giving you the floor.
Thank you, Katrine. I think you have to stop sharing so that.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course.
Can you see that? Okay.
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this webinar. That's a great pleasure. My name is Alice Rajewski, and I work at the ERC Executive Agency as Head of Sector for Humanities. And in my presentation, I will give you an overview of some basics, and then give some indications that can be useful when considering applying to the ERC. And finally, I have some statistics. I will see if we have time to share them or you will receive them later like that. So the ERC was set up as a special EU funding program, and the idea was to leave researchers the freedom to apply for their ambitious ideas without any boundaries. So what is special about the ERC is that it is run and governed by an independent scientific council that decides on the funding strategy, and then it's supported by the executive agency. So scientific excellence is the only criterion. It's a scheme that supports individual scientists. So it's not about a cooperation in the form of consortia. It's totally bottom up, so there are no priorities in terms of topics, and it covers all fields of science and humanities, and it's organized by international peer review. It's part of the framework program Horizon Europe, so you see here part of Pillar 1. I'm going through these basics quite quickly. So this gives you an idea of the budget evolution. So we started with 300 million euros in 2007, and now it has grown to more than 2 billion. You see here the scientific council members. So the president is Maria Leptin, and then there are 3 vice presidents, each leading one of the domains. So for the social sciences and humanities, it's currently Professor Evelyn Krone. And these are the main grant schemes, so I trust that you are familiar with them. If you have any questions, we can cover them later, but basically these have been quite stable. There has not been much change, except perhaps a novelty is still that the synergy grants can have now one PI who can be based outside the EU and or associated countries. And the proof of concept has become a lump sum scheme, otherwise this has been very stable. Still a relative novelty is the fact that the additional funding has been increased to 1 million per scheme, and there has also been added a new category, the last one mentioned here, for which this additional funding can be applied for, and basically this covers everything except personnel costs. So this was in a way done on purpose to give even more flexibility to applicants to really apply to the kind of grant they need. And so to summarize what the ERC offers, it's to work on a research topic of your own choice. That's very important, with a team of your own choice. So the team composition is also completely flexible. So it can be a 1-person team, it can be a 25-person team. It depends on the scientific nature of the project. Then, of course, to gain financial autonomy, especially since the grant is portable, so this gives grantees a certain leverage on the institutions as well. It gives an opportunity to negotiate for the best conditions, to attract team members and collaborators, to move if necessary or if desired, and also often to attract additional funding. So this is the current panel structure. I was asked to pay some attention to this, the panel structure, how to choose a panel. First of all, I would like to say that basically we have these 27 panels more because we need to organize the evaluation in some way. It's not to mean that these panels represent certain priorities or preferences of any sort. It's more really a pragmatic way of organizing the evaluation. If it was about the spirit of the ERC, we would have just one big panel. And this panel structure is also constantly under revision, both for scientific reasons, but also for operational reasons. So if some panels grow out of hand, then there is a revision. So this is the current state. In SH, the 7th panel is still relatively new. So I will zoom in here, so you see the 7 panels with their titles and subtitles, and I will come back later what it means and how to choose these panels. So by default, so the applicant chooses a panel, and then by default the proposal is evaluated within that panel. But sometimes proposals can be transferred if both panel chairs agree on the need for that. Sometimes there are mistakes made by the applicants, clear mistakes in the system, and sometimes there are cases where the expertise needed for the evaluation is in another panel. So this sometimes happens. As applicant, you can also choose a secondary panel. which can be within the domain or beyond. And this should be done only if really necessary, if really requested. So there's no advantage in doing that, or disadvantage. So this, if you do that, if you choose a secondary panel, then this has to be explained in part B1, and this is a section that the panel chairs will read and consider for their decision in which panel and with which reviewers to evaluate the proposal. And it's important to know also that the choice of reviewers is really decided by the panel chairs for each proposal, and in a way independently of, for example, this question of secondary panel. So there can be proposals with a secondary panel that in the end don't need a reviewer from that panel, or other proposals submitted to one panel which the panel chair decide needs a reviewer from another panel. It depends on the scientific expertise present in a given panel, which changes from year to year. So the panel titles are published in the ERC work program quite well ahead of time, whereas the subtitles and descriptors are only published in the information for applicants, which is published later. And the descriptors are not exhaustive, so don't think that this is a classification that is supposed to be comprehensive. It's not. It's just, the idea is to give to applicants an indication of the flavor of the panel. So, but any topic is welcome, even if it's not listed in that panel structure. It's really not important, that element. So when applying, you should choose the descriptors and free keywords carefully, because these are used by the panel chair to assign the reviewers. And yeah, as I said, if a proposal is across panels, then usually reviewers from both panels will be used. And to get an idea about the nature and the remit of a panel, there is a very useful tool on the ERC website, which has recently been revamped, which is a data hub where you can search for all projects that have been funded so far, according to all kinds of criteria. So I will show a screenshot of that later. And you can also consult the composition of previous panels, which can also be useful to get an idea of who served on those panels, who are the panel chairs. This can give an indication. So as regards the evaluation process, the sole criterion is excellence, quality. It's quality-based, so excellence on the basis of the research project and on the basis of the principal investigator. And so you see here the typical evaluation process. So for starting, consolidator, and advanced grant, for Synergy, it's a bit different. And so you see that it's a two-step evaluation, but both parts of the proposal need to be submitted at the same time. And so you see that in step one, it's only the panel members who evaluate the synopsis, the scientific synopsis of the proposal. So they have a generalist approach, because as you can see already from the subtitles of the panels, almost all panels are multidisciplinary. So by definition, if you have 13 or 14 panel members, they will be generalists, and very few of them will be specialists. So it's important to draft that synopsis in a way that it can be understood by generalists and of course also specialists, because there will happen to be some in that panel as well. And then, so at step one, it's decided which proposals are taken to step two. And there, at step two, you have panel members again, and also remote reviewers evaluating the full proposal this time. So the remote reviewers are specialists who are selected by the panel members at the end of the step one meeting, specifically for each proposal taken to step two. So they are really recruited for each proposal specifically, and they are specialists. So the part B2 needs to be written with a view to make sense to those specialists, but also to the panel members who review again the full scientific proposal. So this is a challenge in writing the proposal. And then there are interviews in the meantime also for advanced grant applicants, and then the funding decisions are taken. So what to consider when applying to the ERC? So one important element is to signal that you know the state of play, and then that you also indicate where this project goes beyond. So these are frontier research proposals. So there has to be one one element at least that goes beyond what has been done so far. There has to be something new. Scope and cohesion is also important. So the scope should be ambitious, but cohesion is important. So for example, if you have different case studies, it's very important for the panel to be convinced that the choice of these case studies makes sense and is not random. Most ERC panels are multidisciplinary, as I said. So there is also this aspect of interdisciplinarity, which is not a requirement. But anyway, it can be, a proposal can be interdisciplinary even within one panel, or it can be cross-panel. There's this tension between generalists and specialists. And then there is another element, which is that at step one, the reviewers are expected to assess feasibility of the research, whereas at step two, they are supposed to evaluate the full aspect of methodology. So what happens sometimes is that the panels at step one, they say that they cannot really assess feasibility because there's not enough information on the scientific approach. So there needs to be a certain element of that already in step one. So that's another aspect that can be quite tricky to get right. And then there is this famous element of high risk, high gain, where there's often the question, what does it mean in the social sciences and humanities? Is this not something that was conceived for the life sciences and physical sciences and engineering? But actually the Scientific Council views that this applies to all fields in the same way. So they expect that there should be some high risk element that can have many different forms. It can be whether the field work is going to be feasible. There can be different elements how to think about this high risk. What is important is that there should be some high risk element in the proposals, high risk, high gain, obviously, and it means also some risk mitigation. So that's very appreciated by the panels if the applicant indicates that they have thought about what to do if this high risk element doesn't work out and whether the proposal can still be useful or can still advance in a meaningful way. So there are some common misconceptions that are addressed here. So as I said already, all scientific fields are eligible and welcome, whether they are mentioned or not in the panel structure. The budget is distributed among panels as a function of demand. So there are no budget quotas anymore. They existed in the beginning for a while, but not anymore. The host institution is not evaluated, so the panel members are always reminded of that, neither the one where the applicants come from nor the one where they go to. Societal impact is also something that is not evaluated, and again, the panels are reminded of that. Often ERC proposals do have societal impact, and we also communicate about that, but it's not assessed, it's not to be assessed. Proposals can be shorter than 5 years, and they can also be cheaper than the maximum budget. So here about the budget is really that the idea is that the structure and the content of the research should determine the budget. The panels take the career stage and also the context, for example, local conditions, into account. So that's something that also they are briefed about. Also, the publication record is seen in that context. So it matters, what stage you are at and your local conditions and conditions of the field. And having already an ERC grant does not mean that you are more likely to get another one. So each proposal is evaluated on its own merit. Another misconception often is that ERC proposals need to be interdisciplinary, and this is not the case. So interdisciplinarity or multidisciplinarity is just one element where the Scientific Council considers that frontier research is more likely to happen, but there can be other ways. For example, addressing new fields of research or introducing new scientific approaches or methods. So this is the data hub that I already mentioned. So I just put here an example. I don't know if you can see that on your screens, but I put as a free keyword music, just as an example. And then this is what you get. So you see on a map the numbers of projects that are related to music. but you can also search for grant type, countries, panels, budget, years. So you can do a lot of things here. And then in this case, for music, for example, then you get a more detailed map, and you can see the individual projects, and you can access their websites as well. So this can be very useful to see what is funded in a given field. I have 3 more slides on some elements that are relatively new. One is about Doha. So as you may know, the ERC signed the Doha Declaration. So there are some new elements linked to that the journal impact factor is not accepted anymore among the field relevant bibliometric indicators. So actually the ERC always try to move away from using quantitative indicators in the evaluation, but this has become even more explicit. The list of achievements that you can fill in the track record is not exclusive, so this is now highlighted, so there can be other types of achievements also included. And as applicant, you can provide also a short narrative description of the scientific importance of the research outputs and of the role that you played in their production. All this is in a way meant to help focus more on the content and the contribution of each applicant. Another new element is that you can indicate hardship caused by the pandemic. So this is now an approach similar to that was used before for career breaks, and this will be assessed individually by the panel. And the last one, this is already pointing to the next framework, to the next work program 2023 for the PhD eligibility reference date. This is now the defense date. So this is something very important, a change in practice that we hope will make things clearer. And now I have some statistics, and I'm not sure if I should, perhaps I should not go into that. And I just, these slides will be, this is about Danish participation in the ERC under various views. So perhaps the best is if I just leave it at that, and you will receive the slides from Katrine and Anne. Is that okay? So we stay on time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alice. Yes, please send us, as we agreed, your slides afterwards, so we can forward them to the participant, and you can have a look at the statistics yourself. Please, if you have any questions for Alice, please write them in the Q&A, and we will take them in the end. But thank you so much, Alice. That is really helpful and informative. Then I will pass on the mic to Laura Wang Rasmussen, who is an ERC grantee from University of Copenhagen. And Laura, whenever you're ready.
Yes, I will just share my screen. Do you see it in presentation mode?
Not yet. Oh, no.
What about now?
There we go. Perfect.
Okay, so as Alice, then I would also like to say thank you very much for the invitation to talk about my experiences with applying for an ERC grant. So I applied back in 2018, so it's almost 5 years ago now. And what I plan to do in the next 20 minutes or so is to firstly give you a flavor of what my project is about. And I will then turn to some of the considerations that I had in the writing phase of the proposal when I developed my project. And I will then end by turning to some of the challenges that we are currently struggling with in the project, that these might be useful for you to know in terms of what not to do. Okay, so my project is about forest and people's dietary quality in low income and middle income countries. And I became very interested in the possible connection between forest and people's dietary quality during some earlier research that I had done, indicating that people living closer to forested areas, they actually appeared to have a better diet. But the problem was that I couldn't really explain why and to what extent that the forest was important. So uncovering the links between forest and diets, that's really all what my project is about. Okay, but what is the background behind finding this topic so important that it could justify a 5-year project to investigate it? So efforts to feed the world, they tend to focus on increasing agricultural production and production of just more and more calories. But despite these efforts, then we actually currently have a situation where 820 million people suffer from hunger. And also, I should say that all calories are not equal. So across the world, then more than 2 billion people, or it's actually 1 in every 4 people, they suffer from nutrient deficiencies. So I hope it's pretty clear that the quality of our diet matters. And just when I developed my project, then the Eat Lancet Commission had actually, and that is a group of very prominent researchers, they had reported that 11 million deaths could actually be averted each year just simply by improving the quality of our diet. So the whole background was that it was pretty clear at that time that we really need to improve the current food systems. And especially because our desire to increase agricultural production and then just produce more and more of these calories, that is actually one of the leading causes of deforestation. And the problem with deforestation is that this sheer size of forest loss that we face every single year, that basically means that around 1 million species are currently facing extinction. And that is very problematic from people's diet or from a diet perspective, because the thing is that the forest actually hosts a multitude of nutritious food, such as wild animals and wild leaves and wild fruits. And the neat thing about all these wild foods is that they are essentially free because people can just go out and pick them up. But despite all these links that I found quite obvious at the time between agriculture, forestry, and nutrition, then those 3 disciplines actually tended to be treated as very separate disciplines, both in terms of academic research, but certainly also in terms of government ministries in many of the low and middle income countries. And the results of this, or the result of this very clear distinction between these 3 disciplines, is that it remains extremely unclear which landscapes that actually support better quality diets. So my whole project is really about exploring the nexus between agriculture, nutrition, and forestry. So what we do is that we work at the broad scale across African countries. This work at the broad scale that relies heavily on publicly available data from, for example, the World Bank and then also the Demographic Health Survey. And these surveys are quite terrific as they include data on people's food consumption, on people's agricultural strategies, the type of assets that people own, and a bunch of other wealth indicators, such as, for example, what material people's roof is made of. Then what we also do is that we zoom in on Tanzania and Malawi, where we have conducted local case studies and extremely detailed recordings of everything that people ate in the last 24 hours, and then exactly which of those food items that came from the forest. And the reason why we do this local scale work is that the key problem with the broad scale publicly available data is that they basically do not record where the food items come from. So we do not know whether they actually came from the forest. So with the broad scale data, then we are really only able to say that people living closer to forest, they tend to eat, for example, more fruits, but we can't say whether it's because the fruit consumed actually came from the forest. But then with the local scale work, we can estimate exactly how much of these various fruits that came from the forest and which ones. And so if you wonder why exactly I decided that we should zoom in on Tanzania and Malawi, then I would say that there are two main reasons. The first one is very scientific, and that is that all the publicly available panel data that exist from these two countries, they are very extensive and they include multiple years and thousands of households. So the coverage is basically excellent. But the second reason is a very practical one, and I was very upfront about that in the proposal also. And that was that I already had local contacts in place in these two countries, and I had colleagues that had a lot of experience from working in these two countries that could inform me that it was relatively easy and very safe also. So both at the broad scale level and the local level, then what we do is basically that we link all our food consumption data to mapping of forest cover and forest cover loss. And for that, then I use satellite images. And very broadly, then over the course of the project, then my hope was really to achieve 3 key outcomes. So the first one was to quantify how deforestation affects people's diets, which can really allow us to see how forests can improve diets. The second outcome was that I would really like to be able to discover what actually links forest, agriculture, and dietary quality. And then the third anticipated outcome was that I really hope that our results could provide enough evidence to inform policies aiming to improve both nutrition and also biodiversity. So very broadly stated, then my hope is really that the results of this project can provide the foundation for creating a comprehensive and multidisciplinary strategy for feeding the world and conserving nature at the very same time. Okay. So after having outlined what I'm working towards and what my project is all about, then I would like to dive a bit more into some of the considerations that I had when developing the project. So the very first thing was that given that this is a highly interdisciplinary project that is really trying to link extremely different disciplines like nutrition, forestry, and agriculture, then it was very, very important for me to put together a team of people with very different disciplinary backgrounds. And basically, I think the whole project would fall apart if we had all come with the same background. So I have been very lucky to work with these 4 people. So Bowie, who has a background in ecology and extensive experience with large-scale data sets. Then Charlotte, who is very good at all the nutrition calculations and she also loves doing desk-based research with based on large data sets. Then Emily, who actually did her master's thesis in Malawi, and she has a background in agroecology, which has really opened our eyes to not only the role of forest, but also the role of having trees on your farmland. And then finally, Rasmus, who had extensive experience doing fieldwork in Tanzania, and he is a geographer by training. So another thing I thought a lot about when developing the project was whether to focus on a brand new topic or a topic that I had some experience in. And I should say that I went with the latter. And that was basically because I had done some earlier work in Ethiopia, which you see here on the map, that had shown that people living in forested landscapes, so that's the green areas on the map, they really tend to consume more fruits and vegetables, that's shown by the blue color on the map, instead of more unhealthy foods such as oils and sugars, and that's shown by the orange colors here on the map. So although this was very exciting to see when I did this research before developing the project, then I really couldn't explain why I saw this pattern. So I was very eager to dive much more into this topic and really try to uncover why it is that forest and diets are connected. So I wrote up the proposal in a way to clarify that there are basically, or at that time, there were 4 basic reasons for why we had this very limited understanding of the connection between forest and diets. And the first one was that most existing studies at that time had relied mostly on broad-scale assessments or individual case studies. So what I suggested to do was to take this much more multi-scale approach that combined a broad-scale assessment with in-depth fieldwork in Tanzania and Malawi. Then the second reason was that all the existing research tended to be limited to these point-in-time analysis, so only looking at one specific point in time. So what I suggested to do in the proposal was to use large-scale panel data and longitudinal data, so I could basically track transitions over time. And then the third reason was that that most existing studies had very limited attribution. So I proposed to try to move much more towards studies with or that try to establish causal mechanisms using advanced statistical modeling. And then finally, the most existing studies at that time also relied on very simple metrics of forest cover. So basically just how much forest cover there was in a given landscape. And what I suggested to do was to go well beyond that, using much more advanced metrics of measuring forest cover. So a second consideration I had when developing the proposal was also how to actually speak to different disciplines when you try to combine different disciplines that are traditionally not linked at all. And here I thought it was quite important to be aware of the key issues or current debates within each of these different disciplines. So within agriculture, forestry, and nutrition. So for agriculture, then the key issue was really how to increase current calorie production because 820 million people were suffering from hunger. But in forestry, then it's all about biodiversity loss because these 1 million species were facing extinction. And then in nutrition, it's all about recognizing that a calorie is not just a calorie because we currently have 2 billion people suffering from micronutrient deficiencies. So I think the starting point is really to acknowledge these different key issues at play in different disciplines, and especially also to be aware of what the golden standard is in terms of the methods to apply within each discipline. And just to give you an example of this, then as a geographer, I'm a geographer by training, then you can actually get away with measuring food security very simplistically. So for example, just as the number of months in a given year that a household does not have enough food. But that metric would never, ever go over well in the nutrition community. So then you basically, in the nutrition community, then you basically have to record everything that a given person ate within the last 24 hours, and you have to do it twice on 2 non-consecutive days within a week in order to account for the fact that you might have done this in an unnormal day. So it has actually been quite a lot of work to read up on all these golden standards within the different disciplines and make sure that our approach would be well received within each discipline. Okay, so finally, then I have many times been asked whether I did anything to specifically target my proposal to the SH2 panel? And the very simple answer here is no. I wrote up my proposal in a way so I thought that it was very sound from a scientific perspective, rather than trying to make it speak to the different reviewers' disciplinary background. So I think in some ways you can say that I just followed my heart and my head in terms of what science that I really wanted to do. Okay, so then a few words about something that really helped me in preparing for the interview in Brussels. I did some mock interviews where some very good friends and colleagues asked questions about both the science, the budget, the management of the team, the dissemination activities, and so on. And that was just extremely helpful. So I would really recommend anyone to do that. But to end this presentation, then I would like to mention a few challenges that we have faced since we started the project, because I've certainly learned a lot from this, also in taking this line of work forward. So I think for the local scale work, then it's fair to say that we might have planned a too extensive data collection. As the photos hopefully illustrate, then my PhD students, Emily and Rasmus, they had to do like detailed food consumption records. They recorded all recipes. They participated in cooking. They did focus group interviews. They counted trees and measured or recorded species, did farm surveys, and many other things. So all these wonderful ideas that that I had in the beginning, that has been quite a challenge for them to implement. On top of that, then we faced a lot of logistic challenges related to visiting all the same household 4 times to account for these seasonal differences in food intake, as well as living up to the standards in the nutrition community of collecting data twice on 2 non-consecutive days within a week. For the broad scale work, then my postdocs have certainly felt a bit like doing some detective work at times, because the metadata for some of these data sources, that's just not very great. I think that's okay to say. And we have for sure come across some very unrealistic food consumption data. So that has also been a whole lot more work than I had anticipated when developing the project. But in summary, then both the broad scale and the local scale work, they each exhibit some challenges that I don't think we should forget about, and also that I for sure have to account for in planning of my future work. So on that note, then I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was very interesting. I can see there's already a question for you, but you will have to wait. But again, please, if you have any questions for Laura or Alice so far, please write it in the Q&A, and we'll make sure to answer them after the last presentation. And our last speaker is double ERC grantee, Paul Fritz Kjær. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll share my screen. Here we are. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. What I'm going to do today is, first of all, very briefly, going to say a little bit about my personal ERC story. It's a long one. And then why, in my view, one should apply for an ERC grant or consider to apply one. But also some reflections upon, should I apply? What does it require actually to apply? And then something about, in my experience, the 3 groups you need to convince if you are applying, but also more specifically on how to construct a proposal, what to do and what not to do, but also following that, something on ambition and content, what is actually, how should it look, and also something of style and formatting, and also support and feedback. Now, as we just heard, I'm an ERC veteran. I have the pleasure to have gained 2 ERC grants. But there's also a long story behind that. I've actually applied 5 times to the ERC. I've been invited for interview 4 times, and I was successful twice. First with a starting grant, and last year with an advanced grant. So I did my first application 4 years after my PhD, and then have actually applied for every eligible ERC call ever since. So basically, this is an indication on if you want an ERC grant, hard work is the way to do it, and consistency and keeping up and continuing to do it until it happens. I've always applied SH2, but the panel has changed quite a lot in its composition over the times. When I applied first time, it was a mixture of anthropologists, sociologists, lawyers, and political scientists. Later on, it became lawyers and political scientists and geographers. And then finally, last time I applied, it was only lawyers and political scientists. And of course, that matters quite a lot. I have also been an external reviewer for the ERC at least 15 times, probably 17 or so. So this is my background for what I'm gonna explain you now. The first question to ask is, of course, why should I apply for an ERC grant in the first place? And if you're at least based at a Danish university, it's pretty simple. It's in our job descriptions. Requiring external funding is part of the job that you're supposed to do. So it's a pretty easy way to fulfill your duties and what you're being paid for. But of course, an ERC grant also gives resources and it gives freedom to pursue whatever research that you would like to have. And especially if you are, say, a younger scholar, a junior scholar, then it also provides negotiation power in terms of promotions, permanent positions, that sorts of things. But I think the most important reason to apply for an ERC grant is what I call a AAA rating. Essentially, the ERC is a quality stamp. If you get an ERC grant, you will get a quality stamp as a highly qualified researcher, and no one will doubt your credentials if you get an ERC grant. And that means it actually opens all sorts of other doors as well. So it's only about, first of all, about the project itself, of course, the idea you want to pursue. But in terms of strategic career management, then actually the ERC opens many, many other doors. And in that sense, obtaining an ERC grant is a very, say, effective way of unfolding your career in many ways. The question is, of course, should I apply in the first place? And then everyone, I think, who consider this has to ask, do I have a project? And with that, do I have an idea? Do I actually have some sort of research project or idea to a research project I want to pursue, and which I have kind of the curiosity, the willingness to pursue? And if you don't have a project or idea, then it's going to be difficult to apply for an ERC grant. Also, you have to ask yourself, do I fit the profile? And that is implicitly also becomes a question of competitiveness. Can I compete, so to say? I normally, when people come to me, I typically recommend the people who want to apply for the first time to the ERC. I typically recommend them try to go and look at the list of previously successful applicants to that panel. And if you start Googling them systematically, you don't have to see more than 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 profiles of successful applicants, and you will start seeing a red line of what type of scholars typically obtain an ERC grant. There is a clear red line in it, and you will pretty fast be able to assess, at least if you're somewhat realistic, your own credentials compared to what a typical grantee looks like. And so, and the conclusion of that is maybe, yes, maybe I'm competitive, or maybe the conclusion is maybe I need to wait a couple of years, depending on where you are in your stage and how much you have delivered. The third question is, of course, do you have the time to do this? Doing an ERC application is a very, very time-consuming thing. It takes many months, and you need to take the time to do it. If you don't have the time to do it, then we'll have to wait until you have that time. So you really have to prioritize it and make it a key thing. And also, I would say, treat an ERC application as a long-term strategic project. That also comes down to my own trajectory of applying 5 times. I would never recommend anyone to apply if the intention is only to apply once. You have to make a decision. Yes, I would like to obtain an ERC grant. And then essentially you have to keep applying and keep learning from each application process until you get to the goal. If you just give up after the first shot, well, then you should not have started in the first place, essentially. So it's very much about treating it as a long-term strategic project and make the decision, is that where I want to put my focus? Or do I prefer to put, say, on national funding instead, or on private funding, or maybe not obtain funding at all? So there needs to be a more fundamental decision taken at a fairly early stage of this. If at least that's what I would recommend. Who do you need to convince? There is the 15 panel members, or sometimes 16, sometimes 14, etc., plus external reviewers. And in my experience, you can kind of divide the panel members up in, I think, what we call 3 groups. There's the carriers, the borderliners, and the lost cases. Because if you submit an application, there will be someone hopefully there will be someone in a panel who are close to your field, who are an expert on your area, and who hopefully also likes what you are writing, and who will sort of say be the one who are pushing or promoting or at least advancing your proposal in the panel. Then there is the borderliners. That is people who know something about your area but are not really experts on it. And that's the most difficult ones to convince, because there's typically people who are not really experts, but they still feel qualified to have an opinion on your project. And that's the difficult one, so to say, because that can go in all sorts of directions then. And then there will be some in the panel whose work and profile and knowledge is simply so far away from what you do that they would not be able to really form a deep opinion on your project. So you have to balance these 3 groups, and at least the lost cases, they will have to not feel neither offended or skeptical or something about what you're writing. So it's very much about building, and I think that's the core challenge for our project, is to construct the right balance between specificity and broadness. There has to be a very specific focus on a very concrete problem, concrete issue, which speaks to a quite specific scientific community. At the same time, it needs to speak to a broader audience. And finding that balance in an application is quite tricky. But I think that's where typically the successful applications, they lie, are those who can strike that balance between specificity and broadness at the same time. That leads us then to the question how to construct a proposal. You have to choose your panel carefully, go through all the panels, look at the compositions. The compositions from previous years are public. You can see who are in them, what sort of people, etc. And you will have to, I would simply, if you're say a social scientist, for example, you have to go through SH1, SH2, SH3, and see what sort of projects have typically been funded in previous years, what sort of people have typically been members of those panels, etc. And of course, the same for the humanities, the relevant panels. The other thing is, I think it's important to construct what we call a personal narrative. That is your own personal story of how you have developed as a researcher. And here, I think, again, a question of balance between dynamism and continuity. I think it's very, in my experience, very rarely a project which is a proposal which has no link to the previous experience of the PI goes through. There has to be some sort of basis, there has to be some sort of foundation in previous experience, which makes it natural or obvious that to explore that particular question. At the same time, you cannot recycle old work like what you have already done. So there also has to be dynamism. So again, we are structuring a balance between basing yourself on your core knowledge and what your experiences you already gained, at the same time proposing something new. So it's all about balance. And that balance issue we also see in relationship to the disciplines. I think most proposals have a clear anchor. You can see which discipline, or maybe disciplines in plural, people come from. At the same time, you want to speak to a broader audience and go beyond your discipline. And again, it's a question of balance. Both dimensions has to be in play, and both has to be weighed up against each other. The same thing I think we see in international versus national contexts. If you are an economist or political scientist doing more positivist research, this matters less. That is, the way you conduct economic research in Spain or in Finland looks more or less the same. It's the same statistical models, etc. used. But if you go to fields like, say, art history or sociology or whatever, there is very strong national tradition still. If you look at sociology, an area I know myself, French sociology, for example, is very different from German sociology. And the questions which are considered important and the assumptions people are working with differ widely. And that means that if you come from a specific national context, you have to take into account that there will be people in the panel, etc., who will come from different national contexts and who will different national trajectories of how to unfold a discipline. So you will need to speak to in a broader way than purely your own national context or purely one national context in terms of the discipline's institutional anchoring, so to say. Another balance issue is between theoretical and empirical. Is a classical one. Can you do, of course, it's possible to do purely theoretical work. It happens too, but most proposals I know of, they have a balance between a theoretical dimension and an empirical dimension. And you have to get that right. Both has to be in play. And how do you combine them? And especially for the social scientists, less so for the humanities, of course, there is always the big debate between quantitative versus qualitative research. Are you doing numbers or are you doing interpretation in a different way? And again, I think if you can balance or incorporate both, it's fantastic. If you can't, then you will have to argue why you go only for qualitative or only for quantitative. There has to be a reasoning behind limiting this. But again, we are back to balancing all the time. That's also the same with high risk, I think, because in the one hand, ERC wants high risk research, but it also have to be doable research. And again, I was propose to strike a balance. If you have, say, 3 work packages, 2 of them might rely on fairly standard or conventional or tried kind of methodologies and so on, but then you have a third one which is completely innovative or daring, etc. That means even if the daring one collapses or never can be realized, the project will still deliver something. So in that sense, you have to have the high risk elements, but also a foundation which ensures that something will happen no matter what, so to say. So again, maybe not the entire project is high risk, but a part of the project is high risk. I think that's a kind of thing that you still rely on existing kind of knowledge, but you're also there to go beyond that and risk something. And that's, I think, we are back to the balance issue one more time. Ambition and content. Obviously, the ERC wants very ambitious proposals, but many of those I've seen as an external reviewer are maybe a bit too ambitious. So again, we are back to the balance thing. It has to be very ambitious, but it also has to be doable and realistic within the time frame and the resources, etc. Another point is how much detailed information should you apply? Typically, the questions people come to me with, should I explain my case studies in detail? Should I also already have selected the specific organizations or institutions or whatever people are looking at? And I can only say my experience, as much detail as information as you can provide, the better. You really have to be very, very specific, both in definitions, object of study, methodology, case studies, team, deliverables, work plan, etc. And the more specific it is, the better. And that very much comes down to the psychology of panel members. Panel members have to give you money. And in order to do so, they like certainty in the end of the day. They would like to know what is this money going to be spent on somehow. So in that sense, I would say it's very much about providing as detailed as possible. And one should also, it's not like you can completely change your topic. If you submit an application on party politics in Nicaragua, you cannot start doing party politics in Finland. But you can still adjust the project afterwards. If a case turns out not to be workable, you can find another case. So there is a possibility to adjust the project at certain issues down the way. So but you're in the proposal, you have to show that you know how to identify a good case and argue why that is a good case. And that's, I think, is a crucial thing. So as much detail as you can, and don't hesitate to put more details on that. As concrete as possible, the better. Then there is very much a question of style, especially continental Europeans, the non-Brits. Now UK is maybe not part of the ERC anymore. That's a good question. But the non-Brits tends to write a lot more heavy, a lot more kind of long sentences, etc. And it's not terribly readable. And I think a lighter style, and there also tends to be an idea of putting too much kind of heaviness into the applications. More bullet points is better, kind of things, short style, short sentences, short kind of breakages, etc. And that also means you have to have the core ideas up front. Panel members has to read, I don't know, 30, 40, 50, 60 applications, and they tend to do that on a Sunday evening. And if something is not readable or very heavy and they can't see the research question after they've been through 2-3 pages, people tend to give up. So it's important that you, in the first half page, it's really, really clear, what is this project about? Also, linguistic correction. Anyone who's not a native speaker does not write perfect English, even if they believe they do. So it's always important to get linguistic correction on your applications. And also diplomacy rather than confrontation. You can, of course, you have to state that you're doing something new, that you're going beyond the state of the art, but saying that by saying that everything done so far is bad is not really going to help you. What you can say is that you will complement, you will add to, you will turn around existing knowledge. But that's different than saying everything done so far is bad. So it's very much about having a more smooth, more round diplomatic style. The very confrontative style never helps, I would say. That's not my experience, at least. And that leads me to one of the final points, support and feedback. You have to start in good time. We are back to the time issue. Most applicants, they start too late. I would say you have to start thinking about your idea at least a year before you apply. And you have to start having a draft outline or a structure in place 4, 5, 6 months before deadline kind of thing. And you have to work on it. So it's a year-long process to do this. But also people tend not to use the resources available. We heard about mock interviews before, but there's the EU consultants at any Danish university. There is all sorts of support structures, and you need to use them and also use your colleagues. Get colleagues to read it, to comment on it, to criticize it, find people who have been successful with ERC before and use them. There's too many people who do not use the resources available, which is a shame. And of course, if your topic is relevant, then you can always also contact me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul. I think that was really great and some nice concrete advice, I think. So thank you so much. We will just be moving straight ahead to the Q&A session. Again, out there, participants, if you have questions, please use the Q&A function. I'll just go ahead, and I think the first one is for Alice. What does it mean that the society? What does it mean that the societal impact is not an evaluation criteria? Often we include some sentences like this research topic is highly relevant to one issue in society. Do you think this argument does not take into account, is not taken into account in the ERC evaluation?
Yeah, thank you for this question. So indeed, the ERC is different from other EU funding programs in this respect, where societal impact is an important element of the evaluation. It's not the case for the ERC. So if in the ERC we talk about impact, it's scientific impact. But then it depends also on the project. So for example, if you think of a project that is closely related to a societal issue and that, for example, is closely related to cooperation with policymakers, also in terms of dissemination, then it may make sense to include that sentence, you see, because it will mean something for the structure of the proposal. But the question whether a proposal is relevant for a societal challenge is not relevant, is not considered for in the evaluation. So it means that a project that has zero link to any societal challenge is just as welcome and may as well get funded as another proposal that is closely linked to a societal challenge. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Alice. Then there's one more for you, actually. Hello, Alice. Thank you for your presentation. It was very informative. I would like to understand my position in applying for an ERC grant. I'm defending my PhD in the coming week from Aarhus University and want to continue my research as a postdoc. Will I be able to apply for an ERC grant immediately, or do I need to wait? That's more about eligibility, but maybe you want to answer that as well.
Okay, so, or Katrin, you want to answer?
Yes, I can do that too. So for the starting grant, which is the grant you will become eligible first, you will have to have had your PhD for 2 years before you are eligible to apply. So I would say you wait if anybody else has some input, but you won't be eligible until you had your PhD degree for 2 years. Then there's a question from Laura. Hey, Laura, thank you so much for your talk. You said that you chose your project because you had some previous experience. Where in your proposal did you make this clear? Only in the CV bit, end of B1, or also in the text in B1 and B2, for example, while explaining your sub-projects case studies? Thank you.
Yeah, so I made it clear both in B1 and B2 because I made the research questions in a way so that they directly build on what I had done previously, and that I made it clear what knowledge gaps that actually existed based on the research I had done before, and how I now with this grant could take this new field, move that new field forward, and exactly build on what I had done before. But I think it's very important, as Paul also mentioned, to make it quite clear that this is not just like repeating what you have done in the past, that you really need to specify how this is different.
Thank you. Then I have a quick question before we move on. It's about the high risk, high gain aspect. I think sometimes I experience that researchers within the SH domain have a hard time grasping the high risk aspect. Do you guys, and this for all three of you really, can you maybe put some words on what you perceived as high risk in your proposals? And maybe Alice, you can also put some words on what high risk could be in an SH project. And maybe, I don't know if Paul, if you can go first.
Yes, I mean, in terms of high risk, in the two applications where I was successful, both of them are very much historical focused. They stretch over a very long time spans, 150, 200 years. And then there is questions of access to material, but also the amount of material, the complexity of the material that you actually are dealing with, and can you realistically do that in 4 or 5 years? But also, what is the criteria of selecting this? And also in the very recent project, the one which started here 1st of January, is very much about access. We are looking at certain companies operating in 9 different countries around the planet. And here is about getting access to information. Do these companies actually want to give this information that you're looking for? So you have that sort of questions. But otherwise, I know now there isn't a representative for the ERC here, so I don't want to speak against the ERC, which I'm very fond of. But I think there is also an issue of panel member psychology, because obviously, as a principle, it's about high risk, but people tend to be risk adverse after all. So I think also proposals who are too high risk tends to become somewhat like problematic. So yes, high risk, but not too much high risk.
Thank you, Paul. And I don't know, Laura, if you can tell us about the high risk in your project.
Yeah, I mean, so from a more overall perspective, then it was this whole idea of linking 3 disciplines that are traditionally not really linked in terms of linking forestry science, agricultural science, and nutrition science. And it was a quite risky strategy to kind of state in the proposal that we would do the golden standard within each of these disciplines, given that I don't have training within all these 3 different disciplines, right? So I tried to specify in the proposal that in order to, for example, do the nutrition component correctly, and this has not been done before, then you would basically have to, let's say, if one person consumed 3 mangoes, then figure out exactly which ones were bought in the market, then which ones came from the wild, then the exact weight of that mango, and then like turn this into vitamin A consumption and so on. So this was like an extremely extensive data collection where I hadn't seen that before to that extent. So I think the data collection in itself was the very risky component for me.
Thank you. I think that's very useful just to hear some different views on this high risk. And I don't know, Alice, if you have experienced some you must have seen a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that. Okay, so I would say that that each proposal has a different way of finding some high risk. You know, it really depends. I mean, as we have seen now from the two contributions from Laura and Paul, I mean, that you have already two different angles to that. So I think perhaps it's more helpful to think of it in terms of ambition, because what the ERC wants to see is an ambitious proposal, ambitious project. Otherwise, they will say this can be for other agencies, you know, for national level, not for the ERC. So there has to be a level of ambition in the project. And if you take that seriously and literally, you will find some high risk element in there. And so I think what Paul said also earlier is very important, and it's actually really true that the panelists look at it like this, that if you have 3 different parts and one of them is really ambitious, let's say, high risk, high gain, and the others are more moderately so, then that is a good way to go for it, because you still have a way of still succeeding with a project in some way, and that's important to point out, even if that most ambitious part fails. So it's also true and important what Paul said at some point, that the project can be changed later. So that's indeed, there's a lot of flexibility, because the ERC understands that you know, 5 years and then frontier research, that's obvious that there's a likelihood, and perhaps it's even desirable that the project will change in nature, that there's new scientific knowledge appearing, and of course the project will have to adjust to that. So there is a lot of flexibility for that.
Thank you so much. I think it's really interesting, and hopefully you can use it out there. I will continue with the questions from the audience. We have a question asking, were the research assistants part of the application by name and background, or did you find them after the grant had been given? And I think that's maybe both for Laura and for Paul. Laura, maybe you can go first.
Yeah. So not by name, but I had made it very clear which type of background that would be required in order for this project to be successful. So I had stated, like, I need a postdoc with this background, I need a postdoc with that background, and the same with the PhDs, but not by name. I hadn't identified any specific candidates when I developed the proposal.
Thank you. And Paul?
Yes. I have tried both submitting applications with name identified and also some with non-identified. Those where the names were identified were actually not the successful ones. So in that sense, but I think it's important to as we just heard now also, that the profiles, what sort of profiles you're looking for, is very like closely described, and one can see what kind of roles they're going to fulfill, etc. So what sort of people is it you would recruit, but you don't need to put the name. Yeah.
If I can just add to that, I think it's actually, it's an advantage if you can say that you will do an international recruitment and selection of candidates, right? I mean, for that so it's, in a way, it's true that it's important to define the expertise needs, but not necessarily the names.
Thank you. We'll continue for Alice and maybe the others. Do you have advice for how inductive, qualitative social sciences scientists include a hypothesis or frame their work using that paradigm? Is a hypothesis a requirement?
I don't know how to answer that. I mean, I think I mean, perhaps Paul is better placed to answer that. I think it's, you know, how exactly you develop your project depends on the field, and the panels will judge it according to that. So I'm not sure I can answer more than that.
My point would be there at least has to be a research question. It's very clear. So you might not want to have a hypothesis, which is like the testable in a positivist way, but at least have to be a very clear research questions, and there has to be a link to the methodologies that you are using to explore it. So you can kind of, but I do not think there has to be a hypothesis as such. You can clearly make a proposal without it, I think, especially I would say in the humanities, but that's not my area, but I would guess so. No? So I would go the research question way and emphasizing that part rather than the hypothesis, if you do not want to go down that's more, say, classical positivist way of organizing a research proposal. And I think that's perfectly doable if you are in humanities, also if you are a lawyer, for example, but if you you might have problems in other areas and disciplines. No, the political scientists and the economists and possibly some of the sociologists would like to see a hypothesis, I think.
Thank you. Then we have a question to Laura. How much input did you get from your team at the proposal stage? Thank you.
So I actually didn't get that much input in relation to developing the idea, but I got a lot of help from, I'm from the Faculty of Science at University of Copenhagen, and I got a lot of help from the Sci-5 section where because they have a lot of experience with ERC proposals. So they read through the proposal when I had a draft ready. But I think it was more helpful for me to actually like write up the first draft and then get input. I know many people use feedback from others much more in sort of the development of the idea. But I think I had the idea in my head, and then it was much more helpful for me to get more feedback on how actually to write this up, and whether I had done it in a way that, for example, did this like high risk, high gain, and had specified or put in enough detail for this to appear feasible for the reviewers.
Thank you. Then we have a long question here saying, hi all, thank you for the helpful presentations. I have a question about publications. My own publication strategy has been to be quite selective, which means that I have a high quality but relatively short list of publications, a book with a very selective publisher, and a handful of journal articles with excellent journals. This means that I can fill the 10 publications required for the Consolidator grant and talk about their significance, but I don't have much beyond this most important 10. I don't have another 10 less important publications, basically. Does this matter? Do the reviewers look up your ORCID and see whether you have a total of 12 or a total of 25 publications and care about this? Or is what matters the quality of the top 10 discussed in the applications? Thank you, from an anonymous with a short publication list. And I don't know, Alice, Paul, does any one of you have, yeah, Paul?
Yes, I will. My experience would say it doesn't matter if those 10 publications are good, then it's no problem. However, I think there is an important disciplinary dimension to it. I think especially economists, political scientists, more positivist sociologists, for them it will not matter at all. If those 10 are top, then you don't need more than 10. I think in other disciplines, and now I'm moving a little bit into the humanities too, where it's more difficult to actually decide what is a top ranking publication, because it's the ways rankings are done. There's more national publications written in national languages, etc. So it's more difficult to assess what is a top publication in, say, history or in or something like that. So there you will have maybe an issue of the quantity, because often in the softer disciplines, quantitative, the amount of publications become like a proxy for publication, because you cannot really rank them. So it depends very much where you are, which discipline you are coming from, whether this matters or not. But I would say generally, if you have 10 and they're very good, then you're fine. No, it of course also depends a little bit about the age of the PhD age. I'll be talking about a starting grant application or an advanced grant application. If it's an advanced grants application, you would probably expect us more than 10 out there, no? Yeah.
Thank you. And Alice, do you have anything to? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just to add perhaps that indeed, I mean, the career stage matters a lot. And also it's important to be aware that the publications, they are not assessed as such in like without link to the rest of the proposal. So in a way, the CV in general is, so the project matters more usually. I mean, the project is what is really the most important, and then the CV is there to back up what the claim you make, so to convince the panel that you are a person who can do that you have the expertise. So I think it would be important, first of all, that those publications are of high quality, but also that they back up what you are saying, that you have the expertise in a certain field, that you can do this. So that's what the panel wants to be reassured about. And the publications is one way of seeing whether you have worked on that and whether you have established your independence, for example. So these are things that that they will use those publications for, but they don't count the publications that like this.
Thank you. Then there is a question for Paul. Maybe Paul. No, it's not a question for Paul. Paul said that one needs 1 year to work on an ERC. Do other speakers agree with this suggestion? So that's for Laura and for Alice.
And I might add something, but we do that first.
You can add something. So Laura, do you have any input on this?
So I think that it depends very much on whether you have a good idea. If you do not have a good idea, then yes, I think you need a very long time to actually like develop the good idea. If you do have the idea in your head, then no, you do not. I don't think you need a full year to write it up. Then it can go much faster. So I really think it comes down to whether you know what you're going to do.
And Alice?
Yeah, I mean, we have heard all sorts of testimonies. I think that Paul is right that it takes longer than people perhaps would normally expect. But then it depends. Is it your first big research project? Do you have perhaps already applied to someone else, and you have already some idea that you know that it all depends on that. Yeah, there's a lot of variability, I think.
If I can add, I didn't mean that you should work full time for 12 months on an application. What I meant is that there's different stages in it, and the first thing is, for example, to get an idea, to let an idea kind of grow and mature kind of thing, and that's something which is maybe only taking a very little part of your daily life, but there has to be some kind of development going up, and that takes time for an idea to kind of mature. And then there is another phase where you start putting things in writing. And in the beginning, it has to be maybe just keywords and a bit of brainstorming and a bit, that sort of stuff. And then there is the intensive writing phase and so on. But maybe if you talk hours, this is maybe, I don't know, it depends very much, maybe 2 months work, like effectively, that you need to spend on this. But I think everyone are different. People work in different ways, but it would have to be spread out over a longer time period. That's my point. Rather than just going for like trying to invent an idea 2 months before deadline kind of thing. And the other thing is, of course, this very much, as we just heard about the experience, like how much in the baggage do you have, and also how much experience do you have in writing a proposal. Proposal writing is a specific genre, which is different than writing articles or books. And that means if you first have learned it once, like you've done it X, Y, Z number of times, you kind of know how to do it. And then you can do this a lot faster than the first time, which can be a bit cumbersome. No? So it's very much a learning process of learning how to write an application. And if you have learned how to do it, then it goes a lot faster. But that is also important then for the starting grant applications in particular, simply to see it as an investment in how to learn how to write an application. Because if you gain that skill, you can use that not only for the ERC, but also for other funding sources, like for the rest of your career kind of thing. So the effort are not wasted, even if you're not successful, because if you learn how to compose and how to construct a proposal.
Thank you so much. And to Paul, in your point of view, this is a big question. What is the big difference between your unsuccessful applications and the successful ones?
Good question. You have to ask the panel, but no, I think 2 points here. If you get, and now we are down to being realistic, because every time you're successful or you achieved a certain stage in your career, at least I tend to think now now I'm so free, I can do almost whatever I want, so to say. Now I can really come with some crazy ideas or be very, very like a little bit extreme in my kind of the way what I propose, etc. And then it normally fails. Because in the end of the day, you need to kind of be somewhat inside the orbit of the community you're talking to. There are simply limitations how much you can deviate from normality somehow. So at the end of the day, your proposal has to be daring, ambitious, risk-oriented, but it also has to be situated in some sort of ongoing kind of conversation, discourse, communication going on in a scientific community. And if it's too, so to say, too far apart or too radical or too whatever, then even though the DRC says we would like the the audible or the special or the risk-taking applications. I think my experience is that's limited to how special you can be, so to say. The second point would be I'm Danish, but I spent 9 years in Germany, 4 years in Italy, and so on. And I tend to write think in a very continental European manner, but I learned how you construct it. It has to be lighter, not so heavy kind of thing. It has to be more Brit style, so to say, UK style kind of thing to be successful. And the third thing is it matters very much with the composition of the panels. I remember first time I went to interview, I went in the door and the atmosphere in the room was that I knew I was dead within 30 seconds, you know, like it was not and the second time I went to interview, they were almost hugging me, you know? Yeah. So the point is that you have to find the right crowd, and that's also why you have to keep applying, because the crowd changes and one crowd might not like you, but the next one might, you know. So if you keep applying, eventually you will find your crowd. Huh?
Well, thank you very much. There are no more questions. So
I have a last one
sorry,
for Paul
Anna.
and Alice, perhaps. I mean, do you have any advice on getting a second ERC grant? In Denmark, we have a few who has double grants, and I think especially in SHA, I think as far as I know, Paul is the only one. So do you have sort of any tips on getting your obtaining your second grant?
I would say you have to show that you're definitely doing something different the second time than you did the first time. Because otherwise it will be like recycling. At the same time, we are back to it. Of course, there has to be a red line in your general career trajectory, that you're not just like completely off in a different way, but it has to be substantially different. And I think it's good also to let some time pass. I started applying right away. I think 3 months after my first grant expired, I was submitting the next application. But I think that was maybe not helpful because also some of our results were still in process, etc., kind of thing. No? So you have to be able to show your results from the first one before you start applying for the next one. Huh?
Alice, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. I mean, no.
Okay.
It's true that there has to be a new element. So that's true for anything. I mean, not only for a previous ERC grant. There has always to be a new element as opposed to what you have done before and what the research, the current state of affairs is. So.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you very much to all three of you. I hope it was helpful for the audience, and we will make sure to send out your presentations, and also, of course, this webinar has been recorded, so it's possible to view it afterwards. So if you have colleagues out there who you think can use this webinar, then please share it with them. That was all from us today. You are always welcome to send us an email or call us. Now it actually has to be Anne, because I'm leaving the Eurocenter per January 31st. So if you need advice on ERC in the future, then please contact Anne.
And I want to say that like next week we hosted a new ERC webinar on the life science panels, also with a nice line of speakers. So if you have any interest in that panels section, please turn up for that as well.
Yeah. So thank you so much for today, and have a nice afternoon and a nice evening. Bye.
Thanks also from my side.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.